right, so last week, we started into this insane story that we find in the Bible called Esther. And for those of you that were not here last week, let me recap for you really quickly so you understand what's going on. Basically, there's this king named Xerxes. He has this queen named Vashti. He absolutely, he's like in control of the whole entire Persian Empire. He's the man, he's the king, he's the most dominant leader of the time. Well, the king decides to go on like a 6-month party mode thing. 6 months he's partying. Remember, we talked about how he was partying, what he was partying with, everything he had. 6 months this dude parties. One night he's so drunk, he invites his wife Vashti to come to the party. And back then you just didn't do that. You didn't show off your wife as an object because it was just wrong to do. And so what ends up happening is he invites her to it. She says no. He's drunk and mad, so he kicks her out and says, "I will never see you again." And then his whole council make a law that literally says that she is never welcomed in the king's presence again. So when we enter into the story tonight, we have a king without a queen. We have a council of people that work with King Xerxes that decide, you know what, the best way to find the next queen is to throw a beauty pageant. Best way to do it. Best way that we can find a queen for the king is just to find the most beautiful looking girl that is in the kingdom, and that's how we're going to do it. And so this is where we're going to pick up tonight. But before we do that, remember, here we're going to enter into a story that is really more about Esther than anyone else. Because we're going to learn about this girl and who she was, and we're going to learn about her cousin Mordecai. But remember at this point that these were Jewish people that were living in a Persian empire. And what had happened was there was a lot of, there's a great battle that went on, and the Jewish people were exiled and forced to live, and they had lived there, and they didn't form to the Persian customs. They didn't do everything that they should have. And so there was this tension between Persians and Jews, but they were still allowed to live there. So this is where we have this concept of what is going on. It's like basically you're living in enemy's territory. And this is where we start out in Esther chapter 2, verses 5 and 7. Now, there was a Jew who lived in the palace complex in Susa. His name was Mordecai. He was the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who was a Benjamite. Mordecai had adopted his cousin Hadassah, whose also name is Esther, otherwise known as Esther. She had no father or mother. The girl had a good figure and a beautiful face. After her parents died, Mordecai had adopted her. So right off the bat, we learned that Mordecai is the cousin of Esther, decides to adopt her because her family, her parents, something had happened where they had died. We don't know if it was in the story of the war. We don't know if something had happened, but all we knew that she was an orphan, and her older cousin decided to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to take care of you. And not only am I going to take care of you, but I'm going to bring you into my home, and I'm going to treat you like you were my own daughter." Now, when we actually study about this, Esther, most scholars, most people believe that Esther was between the ages of 14 and 20 years old. Your age. So all of you young women that are here tonight, I want you to imagine you in this story. Because that was the exact age of Esther in this story. This is what we're looking at. We're looking at this demographic of this teenage girl in this story. But the Bible points out something really interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit about. It says that she was beautiful. And not many places in the Bible do you actually find a physical description of people that is actually called beautiful. It's very actually rare in the Bible to find that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes. But notice that the Bible very specifically called Esther beautiful. It goes on to Esther chapter 2, verse 8. When the king had ordered an edict, he had proclaimed many young women would be brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Hegai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace. So here's where it really starts getting kind of crazy. Because you have this young teenage beautiful girl named Esther who is now taken and forced to be in a beauty pageant. Forced to be in a beauty pageant. She was not asked. She had not made a decision that said, "Hey, I want to do this." She was forced to be in this whether she wanted to or not. And I want you just to kind of imagine, girls, let me just talk to you for a moment. Let me just get on your level. I want you to imagine how this is. Imagine being stuck in a room maybe about this size with a bunch of women that are forced to compete against one another in a beauty contest. Just imagine what that's going to be like. Some of you are already laughing because you already know what this is going to get, what this is going to be like. And I can only imagine, like, let's just be real, the judgment that is going to be thrown around that room. Ew, look at her. Oh, don't even act like you don't do this. Ew, look at her. Her hair is this, or her hair is that, or she's too tall, or she's too short, or she doesn't have the right outfit on. She wears too much makeup. She needs more makeup, blah, 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 blah. Just imagine what starts going on when you have all of these women, probably hundreds, if not 1,000 women competing all together against one another, and they're forced to in a beauty contest. Number one, this is what I know. We don't like to be forced to do anything. We don't like that. And you don't like to force to compete against other people that you don't even want to be in this in the first place. But this is what we got going on. And we have to understand that only the most beautiful women were chosen to be in this. So imagine if you weren't chosen. Imagine how you would felt where you weren't chosen to be part of this. And I'm just thinking like, man, this is like, some of us understand what it means to be rejected. Some of us understand what it means to not be included. And just imagine how that felt. But one thing we can understand is this, is that Jesus, when he died for everyone. He's not like this king in the Bible that's saying, listen, I'm just looking for beautiful people. I'm just looking for people that have it together. I'm just looking for the right people. I'm looking for the teenager that's got it together, that loves Jesus, that never lies. I'm looking for the teenager that got it together, that never gossips. I'm looking for the teenager that never cheats. No, God accepts all of us, and he loves all of us. And so he's saying, listen, I love all of you. But in this story, this king wasn't like the king that we serve. So you have all these beautiful women around the king. All of these the most beautiful women that they could find in this entire kingdom are in this. Now, let me preface you with something interesting in this story. So naturally, if there's a lot of women around and you're the king, you want to make sure that no other men are going after your women. Sounds kind of crazy. Dennis is shaking his head. He said yes. All right. But what's interesting in this story, there were a lot of bodyguards. It's almost like each group of women in this contest, they had a special bodyguard that they had. And these bodyguards were called eunuchs. You guys know what a eunuch is? Some of you have an understanding what a eunuch is? Okay. Best way to describe what a eunuch is, it's like, you know when you get a dog that's a male and you don't want him to go find a female dog and make puppies so he gets snip? You know what I'm talking about? That's what a eunuch is as a man. There's a little snip process that goes on, and so they're not able to have a sexual drive to go after women. So basically, you have all these beautiful women, and just the king by himself, none of these other servants or men are going to have attraction to these women. So this king thought of it all together because he didn't want anyone messing and going after his women. And so we find in Esther chapter 2, verse 8, something really interesting happens. Esther was also taken into the king's palace, and she was entrusted to Haggai, who was in charge of the whole harem. Basically, he was in charge of all the women there. She pleased him and won his favor. Verse 9 said, she pleased him and won his favor. I want you to think about this for a moment. That there had to be something about Esther's inner beauty, about her inner personality, that was attractive to this man, to this eunuch, to this guy that was in charge of all of these women. And I've been thinking about this, and so many people are blessed with amazing gifts. People are blessed with being good at athletics. People are good at being blessed with being smart and doing calculus that I can't even understand. Some of you are blessed with being able to just be naturally funny and have good talent and have good skills. Some of you are blessed with being able to be creative and be able to do amazing creative arts. God has blessed so many of us with so many different things. And whatever gift God has blessed you with, my hope is that you will be able to realize that is a gift that you can give back to this world. That is a gift that you can give back to God, and that is a gift that you can use. But when we look at this, there was something about Esther where there was a gift inside of her that her inner beauty was just as beautiful as her outer beauty. So there's something that draws her unto this guard, under this king, or this guy named Haggai, and it was the beauty of who she was, not what she looked like. And so many times we are so concerned with what we look like on the outside that we forget to make sure that we look good on the inside too. See, I've met a lot of people in my life. I've met a lot of people all from all over the place. And I've met people, when you first see them, they're very attractive. They look good. They look very beautiful. And then as soon as you find out who they really are, you're like, dude, they are ugly. You can have it all together on the outside, but if it's not together on the inside, the outside doesn't mean anything anymore. So we have to understand that we have to make sure our character of who we are and what we have going on in the inside is as just important as what we have on the outside. Because Esther shows us that there was something about her personality where she was drawn unto who the king was. And so it was really interesting. And there is no doubt that a person's character and a presence will either appall someone or draw them in. So, I mean, y'all know people that, like, as soon as they enter a room, you want to walk out. Like, as soon as they come in, you're like, I'm out. Because you know they drive you crazy. We all have people in life that drive us crazy. We all have people in life that, you have that one person that's just going to annoy you all the time. They don't even have to say anything. You're like, if they look at me one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have people in life like that. We're like, listen, they annoy me that much. And then there are people, as soon as we meet them, we're like, I like that guy. That guy's good. Like, I'm vibing with this dude over here. Like, that's my boy. Like, you don't even know him, but you just feel that. Or that girl that walks in, you're like, we can be friends. You know what I'm saying? Because there's something about personality that will attract someone or that will repel someone. And we want to make sure who we are, especially as Christians, is that we have something on the inside that draws people. And most importantly, that is our love for Christ that will draw people. So what we see here is, Haggai begins to be like, all right, you're my new favorite. How many of you are a teacher's pet? You know what I'm talking about? Like, you're a teacher's favorite. All right, maybe you're a teacher's favorite. Or, all right, I'm going to ask you this. How many of you are a youth pastor's favorite? Like, you're like the favorite of the youth pastor. I'm just okay, yeah. No, everybody put their hand down right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, but she became the favorite of this whole situation. And what's interesting is he actually gives her better food than the other women. He gives her more makeup than the other women. He gives her more gifts than the other women. This guy that's in charge of finding the right wife for the king, he's like, nah, I really like this. I really like this girl. She's just so nice and so awesome. She deserves all of this great stuff. And we find here that she ends up getting all these things, but there is part of a process that needs to happen. Now check this out, because this is crazy. In Esther chapter 2, verse 12, before a young woman could go on a date with the king, she had to complete a 12-month beauty treatment process prescribed by women. 6 months of oil and myrrh and 6 months with perfume and cosmetics. All right, ladies, let me just explain to you. This is 12 months of spa treatment. 12 months all the way through of spa treatment. And it's not just like little spa treatment. This is 12 months of making sure that you are pampered every single day for these 12 months. You're good, like, you need oils, you need body peels, you need cucumbers on your eyes, you need a facial scrub, you need this, you need that. This is all of that for 12 months. Why? Because you get one date, you get one shot, one night with the king, that's it. And if he likes you, he's going to keep you as queen, but if not, that's it. So just imagine you compete for 12 months with these other women. This is like the original Bachelor or Bachelorette show. Can we just be honest? Like, this is the original show here, because we're looking at this and we're like, the king's got to pick somebody. He's got to choose somebody. All these women are competing on this level. They're all going at it with each other, and now they got 12 months of spa treatment. What's going to happen? And it's interesting that there are around 400 other women at this point that would go into this concept of the 12-month period. But let me sidetrack real quick, because I want you to make sure you don't forget about the other person in the story. So Esther is this teenage girl. She gets taken really without choice to go and to be in this beauty pageant. She makes it onto this level, that level. Then she makes it on the 12-month level. She gets to 12-month level. She's going to get pampered for 12 months. But while all that is going on, there's Mordecai, her cousin. And Mordecai, her adopted father, had commanded her to not make it known to people that she was a Jew. And every day Mordecai would walk up to where like the court was in the front of the palace, and he would make sure that she was okay. He'd always be checking out on her. He'd always be saying, like, listen, like, I want to make sure that you're okay, but please do not tell anyone that you're a Jewish woman. Don't tell anyone in the palace. Hide it as best you can because I don't want anything crazy to happen because sometimes these Persian people, they don't like Jewish people and I don't want it to get uncomfortable. So for some reason, Mordecai instructs Esther to not say anything about who she was. But every day he checks on her. Every day he's looking through the gate to make sure she's okay. Well, after these 12 months came, now it was Esther's turn. Now, you have to understand how this process kind of went because you had this 12-month process where you would go and you would have dinner and a night with the king. And you have to understand that you could bring a gift to the king. And if he was pleased with the gift that you were given, he would remember who you are. So just imagine that you have a year to get ready for this date. But you have to make sure that you're going to stick out in this date more than anyone else so that the king will remember who you are because the king has 399 other women that he's got to go through. 399 other women that he's got to decide who it is that he's going to want to be. So you can only imagine what was going on back and forth here in the palace with all these women trying to figure out who's going to bring this gift. What is it going to look like? But not only that, you ever get nervous talking to someone? Like when I first met Bethany, I was a little bit nervous. I was a little bit nervous to talk to her. And so when you get a little bit nervous, like, am I going to say the right thing? Or am I going to say like, hi, my name's Bethany, what's yours? Like, no, my name's Micah. Are you going to talk backwards? Or like, are you going to act the right way? Because you want to act cool, you don't want to act like a nerd. But you don't want to be too cool because you come off too confident. But you don't want to be too nerdy and you don't want to be too nervous. Think about, I got to act the right way when I'm with the king. I got to dress the right way. I want to make sure what I'm wearing leaves an impression on that person so they know that what I'm wearing is like, it's good, it looks well, it looks good. And then most importantly, you got to smell the right way. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to smell, because sometimes you like get nervous sweats, and you get the nervous sweats, and you go walk around like this because you get the little pitter things going on under here. Some of you know what I'm saying. Some of you are like, yes. Some of you are shaking your head right now because you know exactly what I'm saying. So you got to make sure that like you get that perfume or that cologne on so you don't get that nervous sweat because you want to make sure you smell the right way. Esther had spent an entire year, guys, getting ready. And then the night finally came. I can only imagine what it was like, Esther sitting in her room and Haggai coming to her and saying, Esther, it's time. Tonight's your night where you go meet the king. And as he helped prepare her, it said that many people believe that he gave her a gift or he gave her something that when she took it to the king, that it instantly would make the king remember her. We don't know what type of gift it is. We don't know what, I can't imagine what it would be. But there was something that she would bring to him that he would instantly remember who it was. And so we have this night, and I'm sure she's nervous, but she was chosen to spend the night with the king. And she goes there and she presents what it was. And what we find out is really interesting. She had spent an entire year waiting for one night with the king. And that night, the king fell in love with Esther. He chose her. There was something about that night where he said, nah, that's who I want to be with. That is the one. I'm giving her the rose, whatever it might be. Literally, what it says here, in verse 17, instantly it says that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead. So instantly he's like, nope, this is it. Like they probably met for like maybe 5-10 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, whatever it was. But he was instantly fell in love with her. So instantly he took the crown and he didn't ask her anything about anything. He just took the crown and said, boom, you're the new queen. Let's get married. Let's do this. I'm in love with you. There's something about you that's super special. There's something about you that's going on. And so at that time, Esther was taken to be the queen and the wife of the king. She was living now in a palace, and she had all of the things that maybe she had wished for. But remember that the man that she was marrying, he wasn't like her. He didn't believe like her. He didn't worship God like her. He didn't know the traditions that she had. And this was a king who was very selfish in who he was. And so she had to be willing to let God work through her and deal with someone that might have been very difficult to deal with in the beginning. And I read up to this point of the story, and one thing that I learned is that Esther is actually a good example to all of us. All of us, she's a good example too. Because let's just be real, sometimes life, when it happens hard. People are taken from us. Situations happen in our life. sickness, disease, divorce. People bail on us, people leave on us, and sometimes it's just so hard. The story that we are in, the characters that we play in the story can be difficult and hard. Maybe we were doing well in school, now we're not. The people that said they would be our friends are not our friends. The people said they loved us and liked us, that said that forever, now don't love us and like us. Guys, sometimes life is hard, and I don't have to convince you of that because many of you get it. You're like, yeah, this is hard, and whether it's whatever struggles, whatever tests, whatever hardship you go through, we are in the middle of a story that is still being told. So if you're dealing with something hard right now, just know that simply in your life right now, what is going on, you are simply in the middle of a story that is still being told. You don't just read a couple of pages of a book and be like, oh, that's it, and throw it down. No, you actually pick it up and you read and you begin to process the story from the beginning to the end so you can find out what happens. For some of you, things might be difficult in life right now. Some things might not be going your way. But each of us, each one of our lives is a story that is being written, and each one of us have chapters, and each one of us has stories, and each one of us have things that are going on. And can I tell you that if you are in a difficult chapter, if you're in a chapter right now that seems confusing, that seems hard, that seems like you're not going to make it, it seems like you're going to give up hope, I want you to understand this. The difficult chapters of our lives are the foundation for stories that are filled with glory and redemption. The hard stuff is the foundation for the good stuff. How we deal with the hardships in our life will define who we are as people and how we function and how we can get past that. And so understand that there are going to be parts of our story that are difficult, but it's how we deal with those parts of our story that are hard where we can build on top of that and make a story that's filled with glory. I love a good story that's filled with glory. I love redemption stories are my favorite stories. What do you mean by that? I mean that when you have someone that was screwed up, messed up, and just totally horrible is able to redeem themselves and become a good person. Because that gives me hope that when I mess up, I screw up, and I'm doing terribly, that if I, because sometimes in movies we have anti-heroes. Heroes that are kind of like the bad guy, but they're kind of like the good guy in the end. And you end up not liking them in the beginning, but you end up loving them in the end. So we have to have this understanding that we are all, every one of us, is a story being told. That the chapters that we're in right now will not be the chapters that we're in next week or the week after. And the hard stuff that's happening in our life is the foundation for us to build the good stuff on. And listen, we might not know the ending of our story, but we can know the author of it. I think that's so incredible. That I might not know the ending of my story. I might not know how this life ends, but what I can know is the one that's writing my story. See, the Bible calls God the author and finisher. He's the one that is the author and the finisher. So he's literally writing things down of our lives that are going on. And I can know him. And when I know him, I have a trust and a purpose that I can have in God that is so awesome and amazing. I can only imagine Esther. Esther probably didn't know how it would end, but I'm pretty sure she knew who was writing it. So back to this story, Esther, she's queen. She made it. I'd love to be able to tell you that's it, we're done, boom, that's the story of Esther. But that's not how it rolls here. Because while this is all going on, while Esther is falling in love with the king, there are two men who are plotting to kill the king. Two men that are plotting to kill the king that hate the king. And what we find out is really interesting, that on the day that Mordecai was sitting at this gate one day, he was sitting there kind of minding his own business. Two of the king's old guards came past the entrance, and they began to plot on how they would kill the king and take over. How they would take the throne to the king. So while all of this beautiful love story and all this greatness is going on over here, and the king is falling in love with his queen, there are two dudes over here plotting to kill him and take everything from him. We don't always know what's going on in other stories that will impact our story. So I want you to understand that. There are things that are going on in other stories that might ultimately impact your story. But what we find here is Mordecai learned what was happening. And he said, you know what? No, I need to tell Esther. I need to tell her that King Xerxes' life is in trouble. She needs to know. So what happened is Mordecai got word to the king that these two men were trying to kill him. They did an investigation. They found the men. They killed the men, and the king was safe. But Mordecai was never rewarded. There wasn't like a big party or celebration. One thing we know about this king, he loves to throw parties. But there was no celebration of what Mordecai did. There was no like, oh, thank you, Mordecai, I appreciate it. There wasn't even a thank you note that was sent to him. He just saved the life of the king, but nobody gave him credit for it. See, if it was today, man, we would be on every news station. We would be on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We'd be on every talk show that was there. If we saved the president or we saved the king or whoever it was, we would be literally everywhere, all over the place. People would know who you are. But what happened was Mordecai was not known for what he had done. But it says this. This was all written down in a logbook that was kept for the king's use for later. And I want you to remember that. Because this is going to continue on in the story of Esther. As we continue on, that's going to be a very important part for you to remember, that this was written down in a logbook that the king would use. So that's something we're going to need to remember, that Mordecai saved the king. He heard about the plot. He heard that Esther told the story. He heard everything, and he saved him. Now, when I'm reading this, I'm thinking, well, this is a really random place to throw this in the story. Because when you're reading the story, this is this beautiful love story that's just happening. Xerxes is falling in love with Esther. Esther is falling in love with King Xerxes. It's absolutely beautiful how it's being written out and how it's being dialogued. Then all of a sudden, this is thrown in right in the middle of the chapter. And I begin to think about it. I'm thinking, we're supposed to be celebrating with Esther becoming queen and King Xerxes and all this stuff. Like, dude, like, this is like a random point in the middle of a movie that you're like, why is this even here? Why is this even interjected into the story? Well, do you remember what I said last week? I said last week that God is always working behind the scenes on our behalf. So there's something about this random few verses thrown right in the middle of this love story that's going to impact it later on. Why? Because God was looking out. Because God was watching, because God was examining, God was saying, listen, there's something going on, and I'm working behind the scenes. Because if you weren't here last week, let me explain this to you. In the book of Esther, in the Bible, so the Bible is about God. We know that. The Bible is a guide. In the book of Esther, in the Bible, God is never mentioned. Not once. You don't find the name of God in the book of Esther. But what I explained last week is that so oftentimes there are things going on behind the scenes that we never see. If you think of a great movie that has come out, there's so many things behind the scenes which make that movie great that we never see. See, in this story, there's so many things about the story of Esther that's incredible, but we don't see what God is doing behind the scenes to orchestrate the whole story. So we have to have this understanding that even in the most random part of this love section of this story, that God is literally doing something behind the scenes that he wants us, the readers, to take note of. He wants this story that when it is told to take note of, like, hey, don't forget right in this middle of the love thing, Mordecai saves the king. Just make sure you know that. Make sure that you're aware of that. So what I want to say to you tonight is this. Each and every one of us have a story that is being written right now. It's a story that is being written right now as we're even here, and some of you, it's your first time here. Some of you have been here for years with me. Some of you have come here forever, for a long time. But what I want to tell you tonight is each one of you have a story that is being written with your life. And what's really interesting is all of our stories are different. All of our stories are a different type of story. But they're all captivating, and they all mean so much to this world. Every single one of our stories, every single one of our lives matter to this world. My story is not greater than Isaiah's story. Isaiah's story is not greater than Stephanie's story, which is greater than Akil's story. No, that's not how this works. Every single one of our stories makes up this entire world that is so amazing, and every one of our lives have purpose. And I don't want you to ever lose sight of that. That every single one of our lives have a purpose. When you go to a library, every book that is there has a purpose of why it's there. Some of you might not like this book and you might like this book, that's fine. But it has a purpose. Every single one of our stories have a purpose that's being written by God. And maybe you don't like the chapter that you're in right now. It's okay. It'll get better. I promise you, it's going to get better. The more that you begin to know the author, the more you become familiar with who he is and what he can do, the better the story will get. So I just want to encourage you tonight, if you're feeling down, if you're feeling like I'm just in a difficult spot right now, if you're feeling like things at home are difficult, if you're feeling like things at school are difficult, things at work are difficult, whatever it is, I want you to know tonight that the story will get better. It will. Just give it time. Just allow that season that you're in to pass. Because what's cool about seasons are seasons change. One rolls into the next, which rolls into the next. Like we were just a couple of weeks ago, we were freezing. A couple of weeks ago, it was solid ice out everywhere. Now here we are, and it's getting nicer, and it's getting nicer. Why? Because seasons change. Things in our life will change, but we just have to give it time. Again, you might not know how this ends, but you have the opportunity to know who's writing it, and who's writing it is more important. So let's bow our heads tonight and let's pray. God, I thank you for this story that we find in the Bible. I thank you for how it reveals our story. The ultimate thing that we can get from this is that we have a story in our life, and our life is a story that you're writing out. And some of them are good stories, some of them are difficult stories, but every story matters to you. Every one of our lives matter to who you are. And so, God, I pray tonight for each and every student that's here, leader that's here. Thank you for allowing us to know you more. God, I pray that you will change us in a way that we will have never been changed before. God, I pray that you challenge us to say in the difficult parts of our lives, in the difficult parts of these seasons, that we will be able to get through it so we can get to it, so we can get to the next thing that you have for us. God, that we will not be discouraged, that we will not allow things to hold us down, but we will transition from this season to the next season. And as we do that, God, you allow us to know who you are even more. God, I pray that we will continually fall deeper in love with you on a greater level. God, I also pray, Lord, that you will, those of us that are in here that have been just kind of discouraged because where they're at in life, God, I pray that you will give them hope to move to the next place. That they don't give up, they don't quit, they don't give in, but God, that they remain faithful to what you have. And God, that they will be encouraged to know you more. God, I thank you for these things. I thank you for these students. I pray you bring us back next week in order to hear from you in a greater way. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So guys, we got a couple more weeks of Esther that we're going to walk into. And I'm just going to tell you right now, like, it starts off really good, but it's going to get crazy after this. The story literally takes this crazy twist. If you've never read Esther in the Bible, I want to encourage you. You can go home and read it. I'm going to tell it to you the next several weeks, but you can go home and read it. You can go home and begin to understand it, begin to know it a little bit more, and you feel free to do that. But just make sure that you're here next week and the week after, because we want you to continue to hear the amazing things that is done in the book of Esther.